EL Civics. It's for people new to EL Civics or those who would like a refresher on the information they know about California EL Civics and the Civic Participation and IELCE requirements. I'm glad you're here with us today, and if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I appreciate you putting your name and agency in the chat also. That's very helpful. So I just want to tell you about our objectives today. At the end of this session, you'll be able to identify the requirements of the California WIOA Title II AEFLA EL Civics Grant and specific to civic participation and IELCE. And I'm going to ask for a little polling. How would you characterize your understanding of California civic participation and IELCE? On a piece of paper, you don't need to do it in the chat, but on a piece of paper, would you rate yourself from 1 to 5? Number 1 being I don't know much, and 5 being I'm an expert. So just take a second to just jot that down on a piece of paper if you would. Okay, and we'll be revisiting that at the end of the session. Hopefully your score will have moved. Also, if you would like to, why don't you put your role at your agency in the chat so I can see whether you're a teacher, an administrator, a staff person, or other very important role you might play at your agency. That would be great to know. So if you can put that in the chat for me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much. See, we have teachers, we have coordinators, we have ESL instructors. That's great. Assistant principal, wonderful. So this is the place to learn everything you ever wanted to know about IELCE and civic participation. So let's start from the beginning here. What is California EL Civics? So California English Literacy and Civics Education, that's what the EL Civics stands for, promotes the development of integrated programs that incorporate English language and literacy instruction, which we call ESL here in California, and civics education. And this definition of civics education may be a little bit different than what you might be thinking about, but we're going to go over that. So it's funded by the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, which was originally authorized in 1999 and then reauthorized in 2014. In 2014, the name changed from WIA to WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Okay, and that's where our funds come from, through the state of California, from the federal government. And so WIOA 2 defines English literacy and civics education as English services which enable competency in English language and advanced skills needed to function effectively as parents, workers, and citizens of the United States. So the civic education is not only about citizenship, although it can be, but it's about being effective members of the community. And that's the important, more broader definition of civics that we are using because of this grant. And so the federal government required that there be literacy and English language acquisition, the rights and responsibilities of citizenship, and that it may include workforce training. And since 2014, our emphasis and certain monies I will talk about relate directly to workforce training because the federal government wanted to emphasize that. So in California, this is our umbrella of what we call EL Civics. English civic agencies can hold classes in one or more what we call focus areas, and they are citizenship preparation, which come from 231 funds, civic participation from 231 funds, and IELCE, the workforce-oriented training, 243 funds. We're not going to talk about citizenship preparation today at all. There is another workshop on citizenship preparation if you're interested in that. But we are going to talk about civic participation, 231 funds, and IELCE, 243 funds. Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about. So, what did California do and how is it different? I would say that California EL Civics is very different from any other state or region. We decided that in around 2000, when we got the money, to build on what we already had, competency-based education, or CBE, to connect language instruction to the real world. And so we wanted to add to our standardized testing, the CASAS test, and use a performance-based system to evaluate how learners use the language and measure possible learner success in the community. So not only do we have the CASAS test, which measures standard measures, it also, we have this performance-based assessment, often called an additional assessment because it's additional to our standardized tests, to let us know how students will be able to function in the community. And we also want to connect ESL learners to the workplace, and that's the ISCE. So those were our goals with the money that we got from the federal government. So our system is based on a system of civic objectives, we call CO, general competencies that help students access their community. For example, this one here, employment. Civic Objective 33 is identify and access employment and training resources to obtain and keep a job. So that's the overarching civic objective for 33. And then the system also includes the additional assessment plans. The civic objectives and additional assessment plans we call COAAPs. And a COAAP is a plan for performance-based assessment. For example, 2 tasks in one assessment might be complete a job application and demonstrate successful job interview techniques. So it's interesting, we have a standardized system of COAAPs pre-approved, but we have a very unique and flexible system also, because you can select pre-approved COAAPs or plans for assessment, and then when you insert your content, you be meeting the needs specifically to your students. Or we have a system that allows revision or adding new COAAPs for objectives that you think might be different from anything we've had before. We're going to talk more about that. But so this is it's sort of a mix of standardization and flexibility. So these are the civic participation and IELCE requirements. These are the 7 things you need to do. The first 6 are for 243 and 231 funding, and the last one is for 243 only. So I'm going to quickly go over this list, and then we're going to go more in depth for each one. So number 1 is develop and administer a school community needs assessment and complete a summary form. Number 2, select civic objectives and additional assessment plans, or COAAPs. Number 3, develop or borrow additional assessments. Number 4, plan and offer instruction. Number 5, administer additional assessments. Number 6, and this is important for all WIOA 2 programs, CASAS pre and post testing. And the last one for 243 agencies only, complete a report, which is the continuous improvement report, which also includes an IELCE report. Okay, any questions so far? Let me see if I've gotten any questions here. I don't see any, so we'll move ahead. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, Aileen will let me know that there's a question or a hand raised. So let's talk about the first requirement, develop and administer a school community needs assessment. California realized in 2000 that successful programs continually assess the needs, interests, and language skills of their learners by conducting ongoing needs assessments. And I don't mean to say that they realized it only at that time, but they realized they wanted to incorporate that into this program. So needs assessment became a requirement, which I think is so terrific. And this, there's so much emphasis now on learner-based instruction, and assessing the needs of our students is the first step in that. Okay, we have a question, and I will look at that question in a minute, Donna. Let me just finish this first part, and I'll answer your question. So the requirements are to develop and administer a school community needs assessment, and then complete the needs assessment summary form. And there's also some information about the requirement during the pandemic that if you still need that information, you can go to CASAS.org. And I just want to mention that the ELCivics website, the CASAS website, and the ELCivics pages are a wealth of information I'm going to point you to in a little bit. So the question is, how does a student qualify for this program? And the student needs to have scored 180 or above on the CASAS test. So this student is for beginning low through advanced English learners, not for literacy students. But literacy students can take the instruction, and if sometime during the year they score over 180, then their any assessments they have done or will do in that year will count for payment points. Okay, so let's talk about the kinds of needs assessments. Originally, it was just a general needs assessment. So the community as a whole, what ELCivics information do students need and want to learn? And I'm going to talk to you about how you might assess that. Now that 243 is a focus, we also want to assess the needs of our students related to the jobs that they want. So if they want to gain training and employment, they should be given a needs assessment specifically designed to determine placement in their IELCE program or pathway that you've developed. And then, so once a year, you need to assess the community in their general needs and their workforce needs. And then once you've chosen your COAAPs, as we say, then in the classroom, you could, some agencies also then do a further needs assessment and ask students which of the 6 that our school has chosen, for example, would you like to study in this semester? So there's often an added assessment, but it's totally optional and depends on how you want to run your school. Okay, so this is our suggestion of how you can develop a community needs assessment. You want to choose between 2 and 4 civic objectives from each of the 7 competency areas on the pre-approved civic objectives list. And I have uploaded these slides for you, and all of the things in blue here are active links that you can link to and find it. Okay, so we have a pre-approved civic objectives list, and it tells all of the civic objectives as well as the language and literacy objectives that relate to that. And the civic objectives are separated in 7 areas actually. One is missing here: consumer economics, community resources, health, government and law, transition, employment, and I guess the last one is our workforce training objectives, and that's just happens to be missing this, and maybe it's coming up later. So then the needs assessment will include approximately 12 to 24 civic objectives for the students to choose from. So certainly, if you're dealing with beginning low learners, you might want to just show them 12 objectives. If you're dealing with advanced learners, you might go with the 24 or larger number. And here are some other sample civic objectives. We have in consumer economics, Civic Objective 2 has to do with consumer complaints. In the health area, 26 has to do with healthcare services and insurance. Government and law, 45 is features of the legal system, rights, etc. 52 has to do with customer care skills, personal qualities and leadership skills, the soft skills important to get and keep a job. And then the last one here, 70, has to do with specific training in early childhood education. Okay, and Daniel is offering a suggestion for developing a needs assessment through Google, and that's a lovely thing to do. I'm going to show you some resources and also direct you to our website that has some other examples. So in developing a school community needs assessment, we use the chosen civic objective to design the needs assessment. And again, beginning level learners would need a picture-based assessment tool with simplified words, and intermediate and advanced learners should have pictures and phrases or sentences. But I just want to point out that the civic objectives that I showed you here would not be appropriate for students to see. These objectives are for the teachers and program administrators, etc. But what we want to give to our students is a more simplified form of this. So one example might be for a beginning level student about banking would be use a bank and some pictures of different banking activities. Students could then, if you gave 12 pictures like this, then students could just check off 3 of them. I would suggest you not use any kind of ranking or number system because it's really hard to work with that. But just have students check 3 that they want and then compile the data, and then you have a needs assessment. Okay, so you want to administer the needs assessment to a majority of your learners, and then you want to ask learners to check 3 to 5 of the top civic objectives of interest. You tally the results, and then you have the opportunity to choose between 3 and 10 civic objectives. Depending on the size of your agency or the number of sites you have, you might want to do more or fewer. If you do fewer than 3 or more than 10, then you need to ask permission of your CDE consultant. Most people can fit within the requirement of between 3 and 10. So once you've selected the civic objectives, then you want to look at all the pre-approved COAAPs in that civic objective to see which one might relate best to the needs of your students. Okay, and then you want to complete the needs assessment summary form, which you'll find either linked here or just on our Civic Participation and IELCE page. And that is something for you to keep in your records. And if your CDE consultant visits you and asks for it, then you have it on file. And this should describe how many students you surveyed, a copy of the assessment, and what the results were. 300 said they wanted a banking COAAP, etc. That would be what you would describe in your needs assessment summary form. Okay, now to talk about the IELCE needs assessment. So those of your students who want to get a job, you want to be more specific about what needs they might have in terms of job training. So the first step really is to survey your community for job opportunities, because we only want to give training in jobs where students can actually get a job, and that you might be able to develop a partnership with the employers in your community. You want to decide which job training your agency or partner agencies can offer. And you may have already done this work, but I just want to point out that that's an important part of developing a career pathway for your learners. So you're going to discuss with your CTE and ESL teachers what level of ESLs could participate, English language learners could participate in the training with English support, because our IELCE classes in this area would offer English support to the training and perhaps allow an English learner access to a training class that they might normally not be able to access, but because they have this English language support, they can succeed. So then once you have that information, you would develop a needs assessment based on that of the jobs in your area and the job training that you can offer. And then utilize the results to select existing COAAPs or create new ones. So these are the areas we have COAAPs in now: accounting, building and construction, early childhood education, information technology, healthcare, and manufacturing. If you are doing one of these, we do have a COAAP for you. If you're doing something else, then you would create a COAAP, and we can talk a little bit more about how you would do that. And you would also want to add this information on your needs assessment summary form. Okay, any questions about needs assessment? Let's move on to section 2.
Oh, yeah, I have a question about
Okay.
So if we already did the student survey at the end of this year to prepare for next year, how soon can I do this needs assessment summary form?
You can do it right away. So the requirement is once a year to do the needs assessment. And yes, usually people do it in the spring to prepare for the fall. So as soon as you have the results of your needs assessment, you can do the summary form and just keep it on file.
Okay, so it's nothing I submit?
No, you don't submit it. You just keep it on file. And if you're asked for it, then you offer it. And
Okay.
it's also good to have it so that if you're doing it this year and someone else is going to do it next year, then they have a record of what you've done in the past. And they know what, the assessment form, because that would be attached to the summary. So it's just good to have as a record of what you've done in terms of needs assessment.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's move on to section 2, select civic objective and additional assessment plans, our COAAPs. And so our need in assessment informs the selection of the COAAPs. And then agencies use each plan or COAAP to develop an assessment to give the learners after 30 hours of instruction. So we develop the assessment first related to the civic objective, and then we see what instruction is needed and then develop the instruction related to the assessment. Okay, so we're sort of a backward build-up kind of situation where you know what the test is going to be about, and then you're teaching the information a student needs to pass that. Because it's performance-based, you want to be teaching all the things the students need to pass the assessment. And as I mentioned before, agencies are required to select between 3 and 10 COAAPs. Okay, so I just want to mention there are multiple assessment plans. I think we have about 164. And each COAAP is numbered. The first number corresponds to the civic objective. So number 1 is civic objective 1. And then the second number designates the individual assessment plan. So we have 1.4, 1.5, and those are 2 assessment plans that relate to the information in civic objective 1. I'm going to be showing you more about this. So each plan includes assessment tasks learners must complete to demonstrate that they have learned the information related to the civic objective. And learners have at least 2 tasks, and they must do all the tasks designated for their level. Okay, so you can't just pick and choose the different tasks. They have to do everything that's designated for their level. Most COAAPs include 2 tasks per level, but portfolio assessments have more just because of the nature of a portfolio. And that's all described on our website. Okay, so you want to select COAAPs that most closely match the needs of your learners and your program. So doing healthcare in San Francisco might be very different, the content, than doing healthcare in Fresno. So the reason that our system is like it is we have a general healthcare information, but then you are to insert the content that is most appropriate for your students. And remember to consider the type of assessment related to language skills. So do you want to do an oral assessment, a written assessment, role play, etc.? And you want to choose the type that's most related to the content. So if you're writing a job application and then writing a resume, this is a written assessment. So you want to teach the writing. If you're doing a job interview, then you need to teach the oral language related to that. And remember that the instruction must match the type of assessment. So for example, here in the middle, Civic Objective 9, locate and analyze preschool and child care services. COAAP 9.3 includes written tasks, listing the characteristics of good quality child care and evaluating a child care facility. COAAP 9.4 includes both oral and written tasks, comparing child care facilities and presenting an oral report on child care agencies. So if students want to learn about child care, then you need to understand, well, which of these might be more appropriate for them, the written tasks or the oral and written tasks. And that's how you would choose between, for example, 9.3 and 9.4. So Daniel asked, when we say between 3 and 10, this is for both 231 and 243. So it depends on the funding you have. So the funding source is combined. So the number between 3 and 10 is related to all of your funding, 231 and 243, if you have both. And remember that if you need to have more, if you have a larger agency or you have a large a workforce training program, then you can always add more. You just have to ask for permission. These are just numbers to go by. Okay, and I just want to point out again, it's just once you select the COAAP, then you need to either develop or borrow an assessment. And then you need to develop 30 hours of instruction related to that assessment. So those are three things that go together: the needs assessment, the selection, the development of the assessment, and the instruction. And we're going to talk about all of those things. And Daniel says, so if we want to do 3 of each, that's okay. Yeah, so you can do 3 231 COAAPs and 3 243 COAAPs. Remember that all COAAPs are 231, and some of them, about 29, I'm going to show you a little bit later, 29 of them are related to IELCE or 243 funding. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about performance-based assessment. We've selected the civic objectives based on our needs assessment, and we're looking at the COAAPs, and we want to understand them a little bit better. So remember that this is a performance-based assessment system. It measures the student's ability to apply the skills. So we're trying to simulate real life in whatever tasks we're doing. So remember that when you're trying to figure out whether your assessment or the assessment you're doing is appropriate, you can ask yourself, is this something a native speaker would do in real life? That's what we're trying to simulate. So challenges, remember that the performance-based assessment also challenges the students to use their higher order thinking skills to create a product or complete a process. And we do want to challenge our students. As remember, you have the power to write the assessment. Be sure you write it in a challenging way. We want to challenge our students to learn more, not just get through the assessment, okay? So make sure your assessment is of high quality and requires the students to use their higher order thinking skills so that they'll be prepared to access their communities. So again, develop or borrow additional assessments. And the borrow is if you don't feel, if you've never done this before, you might want to try to borrow one so that you can see what an appropriate assessment looks like. If you have done this before, then you might want to develop it. Or if you want to just start from the beginning to develop, I'm here to help you, and so are your program specialists related to your agency. We can all help you develop an assessment or at least review it to see how you're doing. But I'm going to give you some content that's necessary. So remember that your additional assessment is performance-based, that it shows how well a learner can interact or access the community, that it directly relates to the civic objective and additional assessment plan that you selected, and includes tasks that learners must perform in real life. Okay, and it relates to the instruction in topic and instruction type. So again, if you're teaching an oral skill, the instruction must be oral, the assessment must be oral. And I just wanted to remind you that this is a lot of information. And if this is the first time you're hearing this information, you may want to listen again. And also, I've developed these slides in such a way that they're sort of a playbook so that you can use these slides to go back and gather the information that you need. So don't feel like you have to learn this all at one time. And I have uploaded the slides to the WHOVA website related to this presentation, and you can also find them on the Yale Civics website at CASAS.org. Okay, just want to remind you that assessments may not include these things: true-false questions, multiple choice questions, fill-in questions, matching, or text boxes which offer students the answers. So remember, even at the beginning level, students need to be able to talk to someone or fill out some information without looking at at something in their hand, unless that's real life. So we want to make these things real life, and these kinds of things, matching true-false questions, are not usually real life related. So that's why we ask you not to use these. If you have some special circumstance where you think this might be an appropriate simulation of real life, then just, let me know and I can talk you through it. Okay. So this is about borrowing something. So if you decide to borrow an assessment, you can use other agencies' excellent assessments, okay? But if you do that, be sure that you read it over first. So don't just take an assessment from someone else and think, oh, this must be good. You need to evaluate it for yourself, because just because another agency is doing it doesn't mean it's appropriate. You can find what other agencies are doing by going to this link, COAAPs selected by California agencies, and it will tell you all the COAAPs other agencies are using. Okay. So Torrance Adult School is one of the schools that is willing to share, and actually they have their they have instructional materials online. You might want to, if you want to do 47.2, you might want to look at the instructional materials they have and then ask them if they would be willing to lend their assessment. What's really important is that you be selective and revise as necessary to meet your students' needs, but also be sure to keep it secure, because our assessments are high stakes, which means students can earn payment points for these assessments. So you must be sure not to use any assessments for instructional purposes. So Sigrin asks, for tasks where students need to write a paragraph or a letter, is it okay for them to have an outline of what they will write? If you think that's real life, that students would make an outline. It depends on if you're giving it to them or they're making it. So I might have an outline of the points I want to cover, so you can suggest that they make an outline before they write. But it wouldn't necessarily be real life that you give them, that they find the outline that you've given them and then write to that. So you need to consider whether you think it's real life. If you're trying to simulate a high school assignment, that's maybe a different story. So you need to consider whether it's real life based or not. And we can talk more about that, Sigrin. Okay, so once you have made up your assessment, again, then you're going to be teaching to the test. So you want to plan and offer instruction. And so remember that this instruction is for beginning low to advanced ESL learners, and that you're trying to teach them how to access their communities through real or simulated communication or interactions. And as I mentioned before, a literacy student can participate in the instruction, but they will not receive any payment points for any assessments that are passed until they score 180 or above on a CASAS test. Remember that any instruction should include all 4 language skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing, because we are teaching ESL here. And the instruction is not limited to the language and literacy objectives listed in the COAAP. So the assessment may only have 1 or 2 language and literacy objectives. That's just to let you know what the student has to study in order to pass the assessment. But you want to offer robust language instruction. 30 hours is the requirement. So you want to look at how long it might take to teach the actual information for the assessment, and then add anything else in that you think is related and helpful. And remember that the 30 hours of instruction can include classroom instruction and text materials that are already being covered in a unit. So you could gather your instructional materials from the textbook that you're already using. That's fine. Or you can develop new materials. That would be up to you at your agency. So agencies do this in different ways. Many agencies develop a 30-hour instructional plan which will prepare learners to take and pass the assessment. Some agencies leave that instruction up to the teachers themselves. They say, well, here's the test and here are the objectives, and teachers need to plan the instruction. Either way, you can do it either way. You can develop your own instructional materials, or you can borrow instructional materials. Again, Torrance Adult School and other adult schools, I can give you a list later, have their instructional materials online, and so you can look at what's there. And I'm going to be showing you some other places to get instructional materials in a little bit. Okay. Well, I guess I'm talking about it here. So there's two places online. There's some instructional materials at the bottom here, www.o10us. And we have a new instructional materials exchange that's really now available, although we're just starting to put materials in it. It's a collaboration between O10 and CASAS. We've developed an online system where we're asking WIOA agencies to submit their instructional materials. So soon, you will be able to access materials there. There's actually one set of materials there now, but we're building that up. So little by little, we'll be building up a repository of instructional materials, so we won't have to be relying on the kindness of our agencies to have their own websites with materials. And I would definitely suggest that you go to yalecivics.o10.us and look at the material that's available. If you're developing your own, you might want to use that material as a model. Okay, any questions about assessment, COAAPs, or instruction? Okay. So now we're talking about administering additional assessments, okay? So after 30 hours of instruction, of specific COAAP related instruction, then you give the assessment. And it can be done by an outside assessor, meaning the teacher next door or your principal or your staff member who comes in and tests the learners, or it can be done by the classroom instructor. If it's an oral assessment, we like to suggest that this be a different person than the teacher, just because we want to simulate real life, and very often our students understand us but don't understand other people. So having the assessment done by someone else can be really good, but it's not a requirement. And then students are allowed to take the assessment again if they don't pass, but that would be after appropriate instruction. So if they did one task well but not the other one, then you would offer them instruction in the other task and then offer the test again. Okay, I just want to let you know that all assessments are done on an individual basis. So you don't have students in the front of the class do a role play and then assess them. That doesn't work. Any kind of role play that you would be doing as an assessment must be done with the assessor, not with another student. Okay, so it says here, no student interaction. And you can administer a written test in a group or a listening in a group, and oral report. Different students take different parts of an oral report, but you would be assessing the students' participation in that group work. So remember that. Okay, any questions about administering the assessment?
Can you give an example of what you just said? Because that kind of confused me.
Okay, an example of, let me go back.
I don't know when doing something as a group for the assessment would work.
Okay.
I'm not sure how that would work.
So of course, any written assessment, right, you assign everybody to write a paragraph. They can all be in the same room doing it, and you collect it, right? The same thing if they have to listen to a dialogue or something and then write an answer, that could be done in a group, right? Because they're each doing something individual. And then an oral report, if they had to do an oral report, it's possible that they would do it in front of the room and that you would assess them. So everybody else can be listening to their oral report, but you're assessing them on either their portion, if that meets the requirement, or all of the report, but the other students would be there. Otherwise, in anything else, it would be an individual one-on-one.
Okay, so like something like the diversity, where they're doing the presentation to the group about their culture or whatever, or their partner's culture. Yeah.
And so, but I would encourage you then to have the students who are listening to have some task to do, like to write an outline or to, write 3 facts they learned from that student, so that it's a good listening experience for the other people that are listening to the oral report, right? So that you're
Right.
not just sitting there, but actually doing something,
Yeah.
and that they're having a learning experience while the person
Right.
is giving their report.
Definitely an active listening activity.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it should be work for them because they know what all the criteria are, because they have to do it too, right? So it can be a really good experience for them to be listening to their students. But in general, we are assessing the individual's competence at doing whatever the task is.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
then
Thank you.
you're welcome. And then James is asking, do we test at the level of the reading score, or can we be more holistic? So that's a really good question, and I'm going to write that down because I should definitely always be talking about it. And that is, we are more holistic in this area. So when we place our students in ESL, we are looking at the reading assessment, the CASAS test, but we also should be placing students based on their listening skills, their speaking skills, and their writing skills. So the CASAS test is just one part of our assessment when we place students into a beginning low, a beginning high, etc. class, because we all know that a student's ability in reading may not be similar to what they can do in listening. So you should assess them more holistically when you place the student into the level. And then once you've given them a level, that's the level you use for the assessment, the additional assessment. So in a multi-level class, really important to make sure you know what level each student is at the beginning of the semester, and then utilize that level for the level of tasks and rating scales you're using with the student. And then at the end of the semester, you can decide to place them in another level, and then for that next term, you would use that level. So it depends on whether your placement system is multi-level or a single level placement, but that's the level you would use. That's a great question. Thank you so much. Okay. So now let's move on to CASAS testing. So in WIOA, CASAS testing is very important. Every student needs to be pre and post tested, and you won't earn any, the student can't earn any payment points unless they have both a pre and post test pair. So all the instruction you're doing for EL Civics might not gain you any payment points unless the students have a pre-post test pair. Okay, so they must take a pre-test to measure their skills upon entry and a post-test to measure their improvement. As you know, just the regular rules for CASAS testing, they need to complete an entry record or the equivalent and an update record. And just to point out that one person from each agency needs to take the required CASAS test implementation training and accountability training each year. Okay, so these are the payment point rules. This may or may not be of interest to you, but I like to have it here. So again, learners must take a CASAS pre and post test, and a learner can earn 1 payment point for completing a level on a CASAS pre or post test. That would be 1 payment point they could possibly earn. And then for any of these EL Civics additional assessments, they could earn 1 payment point for each additional assessment passed, up to 6 payment points. And those payment points are 3 from 231 funds and 3 from 243 funds. Okay, so they can earn up to 6, but they couldn't all be from 231 funds, for example. Okay, and there is a list of what is 231 and what is 243 funded. As I said, everything is 231, but only some are 243 funded. Okay, and I want to point out that, we've been doing a lot of remote testing this year, and there is a lot of information about remote testing on the CASAS website. If you're testing remotely, it's very important that you follow the rules for remote testing, and they're all here on the CASAS website for you. Okay, and here's more information, a webinar about remote testing of COAAPs and remote testing guidelines, etc. So if you're doing remote testing, very important that you do this training and get this information. Okay, and there's a question about the difference between IELCE and IET. So IELCE is the funding, is the English language services related to training, and IET can be a combination of adult basic education students and English learners. Both of them can do IET. So, but IET is the whole thing, the English literacy, the workforce preparation, and the workforce training all together is considered IET. IELCE is the English language services related to that. Okay, so we're talking about IELCE now. So as one of the requirements, if you have 243 funding, that you need to complete a report called the CIP, the Continuous Improvement Plan. And it emphasizes goal setting, and it integrates the content from what you used to do, or agencies used to do, the Professional Development Plan, the Technology and Distance Learning Plan, and the IELCE Plan. It's due on April 30th of each program year. And now we have, related to EL Civics, is this IELCE report is the new part of it. So if you have 243 funding, you'll be reminded next year, probably in January, about the report. It'll come out and you'll have an opportunity to complete it, and then the deadline is April 30th. Okay, so just reviewing again, you need a community student needs assessment, you need to select COAAPs, then you need to develop or borrow additional assessments, offer instruction of a minimum of 30 hours, administer the assessments, in that time do a pre and post CASAS test, and then if you're a 243 agency, you would complete a report called the Continuous Improvement Plan. So those are the requirements in general. Again, this is a lot of information. The slides are a booklet for you to go back and refresh your memory about anything you have questions about. But I'm willing to take questions about any of the requirements right now, and then we can move on. Okay, so let's move on. So I want to talk to you about the COAAP selection process. So once you have all this information, now starting on July 1, you'll be able to select COAAPs for the program year 2021-22. So COAAPs must be selected on the website. It's an electronic system, and you go to this web page and make a selection. Only designated people can make the selection, so your ESL coordinator or EL Civics coordinator or your administrator, principal can do that. There can be 2 people designated to do it, so that if one is not there, another person can do it, but really important to make your selections. And there is a deadline of October 31st for the first selection, just to make sure you're in the system. Okay. Once you've selected, you should immediately download the COAAPs into TE, and that makes sure that any passage of tests that you're recording will get recorded appropriately. So those are the 2 steps. Select your COAAPs and download them into TE, or have your data person do that. And there are 3 COAAP selection options, and we're going to talk about each of those options. So we first want to talk about pre-approved COAAPs. So we have, as I mentioned, we have sort of a standardized system, or one part of it is standardized, and that's the pre-approved COAAPs. There are 59 civic objectives, 1 through 54, which are the general, more general ones, and then 70 to 75 are the more specific to training. And just so you know, 41 has been deleted, so there is no 41. And as I've mentioned, all 59 objectives can be used for 231 funding, and 29 of them are designated for 243. And you can go here to this 243 and 231 funded objectives list and find out which are funded and how they're funded. And there are multiple COAAPs for each objective. There's 164 in total, and you can see all of those by going to this link. So another option is to revise COAAPs. So if you look at all the COAAPs for the civic objective that your students selected in the needs assessment, and you don't see anything that's appropriate to their needs, you can revise a pre-approved COAAP. So you can look at what's there and decide, oh, I like the task from, or this task will meet my students' needs, task 1 from COAAP 2.3, and task 2 from COAAP 2.4, for example, will meet my students' needs. So you can go through that and see what other combination might meet the needs of your students. Or you can write new tasks. So those are the options you have. So that when I said this was a flexible system, you can either use what's already been planned and is on the website for you to select, or you can revise something. But there is a revision process. So what you need to do is write a brief description of the proposed revisions that you want to make, either the tasks that you want to use that are already in the system or new tasks. And then you need to submit it to this website, elcivics@casas.org. And then I or one of the other program specialists will assist you in making it ready for your students to use. Remember that it's important to make this assessment challenging. So in the past, some agencies have taken all the easiest tasks from different COAAPs and put them together so that it would be a very easy assessment. Remember that we're looking to have a challenging assessment that will help students learn information that will help them in the real world. So again, you submit a brief description. A program specialist will work with you to get it up to par and help you with perhaps the rating scale and other parts of it that are required. And then once it's approved, you can submit it into option 2 in the website. One thing to remember, if you have one that's put into option 2, that you must select it every year, and that may cause you to go over the 10 required, and so you might have to ask for permission. But in order to keep an option 2 or option 3 COAAP in the system, you must select it every year, even if you're not going to use it. So we have a question about the 30 hours of instruction. Do we need to record the 30 hours in any way? So there's no requirement to record the 30 hours of instruction. You are just required to hold the 30 hours of instruction related to the COAAP before you give the assessment. And certainly you wouldn't want to give your students an assessment that they weren't prepared for. So you want to make sure your students are prepared before you give them the assessment. We expect that you would have, an 80 to 85% passage rate. If you have a much lower passage rate than that, it may mean that you haven't given the appropriate number of hours of instruction. Remember, 30 hours is a minimum. Or perhaps your assessment is too difficult. You have control over your assessment, so if only 50% of your students pass, you might want to look at your assessment to see if it's too difficult. If 100% of the students pass, your assessment is too easy. We wouldn't expect all students to get 100% on a test, even though you're teaching to it, okay? And you would say 80% of students actually attending. Yes, if students haven't attended, then of course they can't pass. So yes, you should be looking at your statistics every semester to see how many of your students have studied the 30 hours and are passing the assessment, to evaluate whether your assessment is an appropriate assessment. Okay, so going to option 3. Option 3 isn't used very much, but it has been used a few times. For example, Torrance Adult School realized that we needed instruction in digital literacy, and so a whole new 47 and 48 were developed by them. And then all of the new workforce training COAAPs that we've done, 70 to 75, have all been started out as option 3. One thing that happens when you work with your program specialist, if we realize that your COAAP that you're writing for your agency is applicable to other agencies, then we would put it in the system as pre-approved. So it may be an option 2 or option 3 for you if we think it's only applicable to your agency. But if it's applicable to others, we may take it into our pre-approved system so that everybody could utilize it. Okay, and the system for option 3 is the same. It just needs to be something that's completely new and hasn't been used before, that it doesn't relate to any of the civic objectives we already have, and then you would use the option 3 system. Okay, just a reminder, agencies may select between 3 and 10 COAAPs. If you want to select more than 10 or fewer than 3, you need to talk to your, or write a letter. I would appreciate a CC so I know that you're doing this. lbhoward@casas.org. Ask for permission from your CDE consultant. And remember that you need to be designated as ELC primary or ELC secondary to submit or select the COAAPs. So if your agency should write an email to your program specialist and ask to be designated as the ELC primary or ELC secondary if you don't have permission. And usually we have 1 or 2 people in an agency who have that designation so they can select the COAAPs. Okay, and here are the deadlines, and these are the yearly deadlines. So every year, October 31st, at least 1 COAAP must be submitted or selected. This is just to see whether you've been able to access the system, whether you have a person designated to select, and whether they can select. But we make sure that everybody has at least 1 by October 31st. So, and again, the system opens up to you on July 1. So just a little bit of time from now. And then April 30th is the last day to add, edit, or delete option 1 COAAPs. So just to make sure, every year we have a few agencies that realize that one of their teachers taught a COAAP that they hadn't selected or downloaded into TE. So make sure that before April 30th you've checked what everyone has taught and that you have selected all the appropriate COAAPs. Otherwise, the payment points that your student may have earned will not count. Option 2 also, last day to add, edit, or delete. But if you're going to do an option 2, we would like to know about it at least a month before the deadline, because it isn't just selecting something that's already there, it's working through it. So we need to have your information at least a month before. And the same with option 3, because it's completely new, we need time to evaluate it. And so that deadline for option 3 is January 31st. Okay, and we just want to say that our EL Civics program has been really successful. Students enrolled in Civic Participation and IELCE, we realize they persist and achieve higher percentage of level completions than those in just regular ESL classes. And we think that's because of the needs assessment we've done with them. They are learning something they've asked to learn, and so they're more likely to persist. Because of that, we've had higher standardized test scores as well. So we suggest that you review your local agency data to see what kind of successes that you've had with your EL Civics students. And just a little bit more information of that, here are some statistics. In 2018-19, again, our data is always 2 years behind the current year, but we had 208,000 students enrolled in ESOL courses. 120 participate in EL Civics courses, and then we had 82,000 of them, a high percentage, who passed one or more 231 funded COAAPs, and then a similar statistics for the 243 COAAPs as well. So we've had really high performance of the COAAPs as well as the standardized test. Okay, I want to point out some resources to you. Our EL Civics page is really important, and I can go over this with you when we finish the slides. But there's a lot of webinars. So we have a tour of the website, this first one. We have another session, and actually I'll be doing this session at 11:45 today, understanding, implementing, and revising COAAPs. So if you want more specific information about the COAAP system and how to select them and what it's all about, etc., I'll be doing the training at 11:45 today, and I'd welcome you to attend that. We also, if you're working in IELCE, we have a training called Planning and Implementing a New IELCE Program. There's information about remote testing, and again, if you need information about citizenship preparation, that training will also be going on today. A very important document, there's a lot of documents, but one that I suggest you read every year after July 1 is this FAQ document. Any new information you need or any questions that have been asked go in that document. And during the year, if we add anything to it, we put it in a green text so you can tell if you've read it on July 1, and then anytime during the year you can glance through and see if anything new pops up for you. Remember also that we have EL Civics network meetings. They're held monthly and really important to get updated EL Civics information. You can get on the mailing list by emailing elcivics@casas.org. And then we ask that you register for training. We're having a meeting next Wednesday. They're always on Wednesdays from 1 to 2:30. Next Wednesday, June 30th, from 1 to 2:30, we'll be doing regular information, and we'll also have information about Creative Commons licensing and accessibility, two things that are really important for you as you distribute these instructional materials that you're developing within your agency, and also if you want to submit to the EL Civics Exchange. Those are two requirements of the EL Civics Exchange as well, so that's going to be coming up on June 30th. So please become a member of the network, and you'll get notices about the meetings, and there's really important information as well as sharing of agencies who are giving their information that you might need. Just want to tell you also a recent article came out in the COAAP Journal about EL Civics. If you want information in general about the history of EL Civics in California, this article could give you that information from the COAAP Journal this winter session. And then, very important, if you have policy and fiscal questions, you should be contacting your CDE regional consultant. They are the people who work with your agency on policy and fiscal issues. CASAS is funded by the California Department of Education to offer training and technical assistance in instruction, assessment, and data collection. So if you have those questions, you should be contacting your CASAS program specialist. And you can find the list of your program specialist at casas.org. Okay, and then again, elcivics@casas.org. If you have any questions, always go to that website. You can email there and go to this California Civic Participation and IELCE page for any of your questions. And I'm going to take you there in just a minute. So I think we've met our goal about going over the requirements. And now I thought I can answer questions at this point, or I can just take you to the website and give you a little tour of what's there for you. Are there any questions? You're welcome to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Oh, I've got a question here. Can this instruction be independent study? Yes, you can follow whatever distance learning or independent study rules your agency has, as long as you're following the rules and you put it in your local assessment policy. Remember, any kind of assessment should be listed in your local assessment policy. And so your instruction and assessment could be listed there that you are giving independent study. And yes, as long as you require the 30 hours of independent study before the assessment is given. So the difference between 231 and 243 funding, it's just a different pot of money. So first of all, you needed to apply for it in your grant. So your agency is funded for either 231 or 243 or for both. And you needed to apply for it last last spring, a year ago spring, to be part of the WIOA Title II grant, and you would have requested at that time for 231 or 243 funding. 231 is the general WIOA 2 funding, and 243 is for workforce training. So the English support related to workforce training. So you need to find out whether your agency has 243 funding, and if they do, then you'd want to go back and do this training called Planning and Implementing a New IELCE Program. That's the 243 funding, and you would get more information about that, how to utilize your 243 funding. I hope that answered your question. Anything else? Okay.
Lori?
Yes.
I think Sarita Davis had her hand raised.
Okay. Would you like to, thank you so much, Aileen. Serena, would you unmute and ask your question?
Yes, hello. This might be too in-depth for the time that it would be allotted, but just real quick, I've been teaching civics in my Burlington English class online, and so they haven't been doing any paperwork. So this summer I was going to see if they could do the paperwork, because I was told that they wouldn't be able to get any credit. It's a non-credit class anyway, but we were thinking about being able to give them credit, and the only way to do that would be if there was homework. So I was going to use the civics section of which I've been using anyway, but as far as printing out all the homework for them to do during this my summer class, would that be a good start for being able to give them the 5 credits for the class? Or
Sarita, what school are you at?
I'm at Chaparral in Ojai.
Is that a community college or an adult school?
Adult school.
Okay, and are you funded through the WIOA Title II program?
That I don't know. I've just taken over for one of the teachers in March, and I'm just trying to get it so that maybe they could get some credit.
So I'm not aware that your agency is funded, but I would be happy to talk to you about that either after this session or later this week. Second of all, so we don't, our program does not relate to credits, so I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. There would not need to be homework per se. You know, there needs to be instruction. Instruction doesn't necessarily have to have homework. So I'm not sure where you're getting the information about that. It sounds like you're...
Well, the secretary at the school told me that they probably wouldn't be able to get any credits, because most of the students are in the adult school separately, going through the government programs and classes. And she just mentioned that, you know, if they had homework, then they could have the credits.
So why don't you email me at lbhoward@casas.org.
LB?
Hold on, I'll put it up here just a second.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, there's my address, and let's have a conversation. I'm not sure, it doesn't sound like you're WIOA funded, but I'd be happy to help you with whatever question you have and get to the bottom of that. Okay?
Thank you so much. I appreciate
welcome.
it.
And anybody else with a question, feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah, and Jim says it sounds like you're referring to high school credit. Those might be students who are still getting high school, taking high school classes, and I agree with you, that's maybe what it is. But we'll talk, Sarita and I will talk about that further. Anyone else have a question? Okay, so let me just quickly go back a slide or two. I just wanted to take your paper out again and rate yourself, characterize yourself, your understanding of civic participation and IELCE on your same piece of paper. Do you know a little bit more? Can you score yourself higher from what you've learned today? I hope you can. And I hope you've learned more. I know I've got some tried and true long-time EL Civics people here, so I hope you've gotten some extra information. And I also want to mention that really important that whatever information you've gleaned that you share with your administrators, teachers, staff members, because everybody needs to know this information. So it'd be great not just to keep this to yourself, but to share with others. You're welcome to download this PowerPoint, which you can get in the WHOVA site or on our EL Civics website, and share it with your partners. Again, I know the slides have a lot of information on them, but hopefully you can use that as sort of a fact sheet for you to go back to. So now I thought I would take you to the CASAS website. So those of you, if you've gotten the information you've needed, you feel free to leave the session. But I thought the next thing to do would be to look at our website that has so much information and would be helpful to people who are not familiar with it. So here's our CASAS website, again, www.casas.org. And then if you just scroll down, whoa, there we go. Scroll down on the left-hand side, and over here you have California EL Civics. This website is open to everyone. I'm not sure if everyone here is from California. If you're not, know that all of these rules I've talked about today are only related to California, but might give you some idea about what you might do at your agency in other states or regions. If you click on that, you see California EL Civics, and then you see another menu over here on the left-hand side. I hope you're all seeing this. So anything you want to know about remote testing is here at this first link. The IELCE report I talked about, that's part of the CIP, the Continuous Improvement Plan, you can find here. If you want to learn more about California citizenship preparation there. And the next one is the page I've been talking about, California Civic Participation and IELCE. But before I go there, I want to show you that if you want to know who your program specialist is, you could click on this and you would have a list of your program specialists. And they are related by the location of your agency. Okay, so here is our CASAS website, and I'm just going to check the chat. So I see some people going, and thank you. We're getting some that people like to get a refresher, which is great. So here are if you're new to this website, everything is important, but these first 4 items are the most crucial. So the pre-approved additional assessment plan list, that's the one I was talking about, where you need to find your COAAP. So let's go there. And this system is you need to decide which COAAP you're going to look at. We talked about 33, so let's go to 33. You just go to the drop-down menu, you click here, and you hit go. Be sure to toggle for the appropriate year. So we're still in 2021, but on July 1, you'll be able to see 21-22 for the ones that you need to look at. And so you hit go, and then you scroll down, and hold on, I've got other things in the way here. Whoops. And you will see all the different COAAPs that are available to you. So one of the ones that we've been looking at is 30, and I also put this, I think, in your folder, in the WHOVA folder. You go over here to the right-hand side and click on View Details, and then you see what's in the COAAP. And I'll be talking more about this at 11:45, but you have your language and literacy objectives here at the top, and then your task. So task 1 is complete a job application. It tells you what each level of student needs to do. And then there's the rubric that you need to follow in order for the score. So as someone asked before, the level of the student is really important, so you know which parts of the assessment to give them. Task 2 is role play a job interview. And then at the end, there is a rating scale. So depending on the student's level, they would have to pass at a score of 35. For example, intermediate low students need to pass at a score of 35 in order to get a pass on this test. Any questions about?
Yes, I have a question, Lori. So,
Sure.
that intermediate high, intermediate low, now is that dictated by the class that they're in or their CASAS test score?
So ESL should be, you should be placing students based on a combination of measures. The CASAS test, the reading test, and you should also be looking at their listening skills, their writing skills, and their speaking skills. Each CASAS test has a test administration manual. And in the test administration manual, it gives ideas for looking at a student's oral skills, their writing skills, and their listening skills. Our levels are based on the California Adult Education Standards. Let's see if I can take you, sorry for the scrolling, but down at the bottom in the resources, we have, unfortunately, what is an old document, but what is still a good document, and the one we rely on, which is the California ESL Model Standards. Now, unfortunately, our document is in a PDF form, and it's just it's a fax. It's sort of not a fax, but it's not in the best condition. Oh yeah, this one is good. Good. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here over on the left, and we have a page here that says levels of language proficiency. Okay, this is what our levels are based on. And whoops, let's see if I can get in here. Okay, so it says description of the levels. So the levels are listed here. Here's the ESL beginning literacy level. Here's what a student can do. Let's go to beginning. You suggested intermediate. I think that would, let's see. Intermediate, okay? So your class there's an emphasis on fluency and communication, okay, is what it talks about here. And it talks about the language functions, what a student can do. They can express obligation, explain, indicate certainty, etc. Your course outlines for your courses in your district should be based on this, as well as the more current content, English language proficiency standards. So you should get your levels for your district from these documents. And they are a combination of the reading test as well as listening, speaking, and writing. So when you place your student in the level, they should be able to do these skills, and you should be looking at these documents as well as the English language proficiency standards to decide about that. I can, if you write to elcivics@casas.org, I can send you a chart that sort of delineates the level of proficiency related to the English language proficiency standards, if you're familiar with that. But it's not just the CASAS test, if that answers. Any other question?
Can you share this link on the chat box, please? The one for that document that you had before?
Okay, let me see if I can do that. Where's my chat? There we go. And it is an older document. You'd also want to be looking at the content standards. I'm the college and career readiness standards and the ELPS, the English language proficiency standards. But they put their levels like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so it's a little hard to use our beginning low, beginning high, but this will give you a good idea. And you should all have course outlines in your districts that would label beginning low, beginning high, etc., because that's a requirement for the state. So you should be looking at what your district requires. This is the state document, but you should be looking at how your district labels beginning low, beginning high, intermediate low, intermediate high, and all the skills a student needs to have, and then set up your placement based on that. So, but that's a whole ESL question rather than related to EL Civics specifically, but they, of course, are all intertwined. So let's go back. We just have a couple of minutes left. Anything you'd like me to show you on the CASAS website? Anything particular? But I think these first few documents are really important. So the first bullet and the second bullet are really the same, but the second one you can't get into unless you are the ELC primary. So let me just show you that one. It looks a little bit different. So here, once you've looked in the first bullet to see the kind of COAAPs that are available, etc., and once you're ready to select, then you need to come here to select. We'll be doing that in just starting July 1. Let me see if I can take you there. Well, it's not open yet, so it won't be open till July. Yeah, let's see if I can get in. Oh yeah, well, you won't see all of this because I'm a super user, so let's see what I can show you here. Yeah. Well, I don't have my whole list here, so I really can't get in either. So but anyways, just so you know, this is where you would go. Let me show you this California COAAP selected by California agencies, because that's where you would, if you want to borrow instructional materials or assessments, you could go here. So you don't want to look at the agency, but you want to go to this second one, number of agencies that have selected pre-approved objectives. So then you can see here, so let's say you want to teach 47 point, whoops, or let's say you want to teach 33, the one we've been looking at. So you're going to scroll down. Whoops, see if I can go a little bit faster here. Okay, let's look at 33.7. Look, it's a very popular one. A lot of people are using it. So if I click on that, I see all the agencies. So I might want to look at and see which agency may be in my area, because probably the needs of the students in your area are more similar. So if I'm in the Central Valley, I might look at Clovis Adult School. And maybe I know someone at Clovis Adult School, and I'm going to call them, okay, and ask if I can borrow their instructional materials and assessments. So that's how you would find out who has these, who else is teaching the same COAAP you want to. As we scroll down, the first gray box here has a lot of PDFs or documents that you would be interested in. So this FAQ document I told you, I just updated it. So it's the new information for this year. This document, Revisions to COAAPs, tells you any changes that have been made throughout the year. This document here, the Pre-Approved Civic Objectives List, I talked about that. And this tells you, this shows you the objective and all the language and literacy objectives you could use. Remember, only a few of them are going to be listed on the COAAP itself, but if you want to have robust instruction, you might look at these. And we've just recently updated all the COAAPs and all the language and literacy objectives. So this is a really important document for you to plan your lessons, or the lessons that you are developing for your other teachers, and to see what kinds of things would be important. One thing here is we've added the information about the immigrant integration indicators. So a lot of this has been updated to look at that. For example, identify, let's see. So one of the things in the indicators is manage and avoid consumer debt. So we never used to have that as an example, but we've gone through and added those examples in so that you can see the kinds of things that you might want to think about or teach that you might not have been teaching already. So this is if you're teaching Civic Objective 1, you certainly want to, as a teacher or an administrator, you want to come here and see the kinds of things that should be taught, that you can touch upon, as well as what's going to be assessed. we've added, online and mobile payment services that haven't been there necessarily before. So we've tried to update this document. Okay. All the webinars I was telling you about are listed here. So the YouTube webinar that you can get this training for any of these topics, and then all the slides that go along with it are here on the website for you. Information about distance learning. If you were talking about independent learning, you might want to look here for that information. This is information for IELCE. If you're interested in doing some digital resources, some of these may be a little bit older, but we think they might be useful to you in terms of digital resources and how to create a fillable form, etc. We've tried to offer that information. And then you should know that every month WIOA 2 agencies are invited to meetings by their program specialist. And if you can't go to the meeting, all of the PowerPoints, slides are listed at this site. So you can watch the statewide, now we do statewide meetings, and you can watch all the meetings here, or you can go to the slides, which are listed below. So all of the slides are here. So any information you need, it's good to just scroll through these slides to see if there's any information that's important to what you're doing. And the last thing I wanted to show you, whoops, let's go back. Go back one page. Okay, is just to say, here's all the needs assessment information that we talked about. Yeah, and I think that's it. So that's a good tour. So any last questions as we close out here? I hope this has been useful to you. Again, if you have questions, elcivics@casas.org, or my address, lbhoward@casas.org, and I would be happy to help you. Let me just go back to the slides so you can have my email address. Any last questions? We have 2 minutes. Thank you so much for attending. I see many of you are leaving now, and thank you. I'm glad it was helpful to you. Sarita, please contact me, and we'll meet separately. And if I can be of help to you, I would very much like to be of help. So great being with you today. Good luck and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Lori. Please remember to complete your session evaluation. You can complete the evaluation through the rate session button on the session page or through the surveys tab on the main navigation. Thank you for joining us. See you in the next session.